start. I think my colleague will update us and then we'll start.
So, yeah. Welcome to the e-workshop series, second on COVID-19 for healthcare professionals by Public Health Foundation of India. If you have any questions related to the COVID-19 or the session, you can put it up in the Q&A section. There is a Q&A section down below. You can put up all of your questions down there. There will be a Q&A round after the session. And if you have any issues regarding the audio and video of the webinar, you can put it up in the chat box, normal chat box. Our IT support is there to help you on that. Now I would like to hand it over to the Director of Training Department, Public Health Foundation of India, Dr. Sandeep Bala. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Very good afternoon to all the healthcare professionals and colleagues, those who have joined from the different parts of the globe today, in continuation of our second e-workshop webinar series, which we started in collaboration with the RIS and GDC. As world battles with the huge crisis of COVID-19 pandemic, which has put up healthcare systems of various countries out of gear, we at PHFI, along with GDC and RIS, we thought that there is a dire need to upgrade the knowledge of our healthcare professionals, and we appreciate the role of healthcare professionals to combat this growing burden of the diseases. During this time, it is important to disseminate the best practices and counter misinformation to the health workforce. WHO has already declared the outbreak of COVID-19 as a pandemic and health emergency of international concern. As per the WHO, today's data, there are more than 2.6 million confirmed cases all across the globe, and with around 1.8 lakhs mortalities have already happened. It is covering around 213 countries. In the African region, the COVID-19 process has recently started, and there are around 18,234 cases. And mortality in the African region currently is 788. East Asia accounts for 38,572 cases with 1,554 confirmed deaths, with maximum number of cases arises in India. Healthcare professionals are leading the fight against COVID-19, and to support this, PHFI, GDC, and RIS again continuing their efforts to launch this 4 sessions of webinar series, e-workshop series. And we are really happy that today we have around 700 registrations from different 31 countries all across the globe. Public Health Foundation of India is a premier public health tank which has been set up in 2006 as a first public-private partnership model. Initial kitty was given by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So the purpose of this organization is to act as a catalyst in the field of public health and to upgrade the stature of public health in India. Research Information System is another think tank for developing countries which has been based in New Delhi, which is working on a policy research that specializes issues related to the international economic development, trade, investment, and technology. Just the Global Development Center has been established under Research Information System, and which focuses on institutionalizing the knowledge on India's development initiatives and promote their replication as a part of knowledge sharing in Asia and Africa with the help of its institutional partners, including civil society organizations. These webinars will provide credible information on the pandemic as well as opportunity to the participants for better understanding the science and the public health impact of COVID-19. To start this series, today we have the leadership from Research Information System, and we have Ambassador Sinha representing the Research Information System. Sir, we are really thankful to you to join us and to helping us in continuing this particular series. Ambassador Amar Sinha is currently the chairman of Interim Advisory Council of Global Development Center at RIS. He retired from the Indian Foreign Services as a Secretary Economic Relations in the Ministry of External Affairs, New Delhi in June 2017 after a diplomatic career spanning of 35 years. He has served in different capacities in Indian missions around the world. As headquarters, he has served as a Principal Secretary of the Minister of State in the Ministries of External Affairs, Chemicals, Fertilizers, and Department of Electronics. On his retirement from diplomatic services on 30th June 2017, he has been appointed as a director of Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited and also serves on the board of Barefoot College of India as a non-profit organization. He joined the RIS as a distinguished fellow in November 2017 and has lent support to several think tanks focused on Afghanistan and other strategic issues. He also advises chambers of commerce on trade and investment issues. With this background, it is always better to hear from none other than but Ambassador Sinha, the opening remarks on behalf of RAS. I would request, sir, you can kindly guide us and help us that how this workshop series are creating and really an impact, and what importance this workshop series is in creating for the developing countries with special focus on African as well as South Asian countries. Sir. Over to you, Ambassador Sinha.
Thank you, Dr. Good afternoon to all the panelists and all the participants. Let me begin by wishing all of you a very peaceful and holy month of Ramadan, which started yesterday. In fact, and I know many of you who would be observing it around the world. In fact, this becomes even more challenging, both for the patients and also for the health workers. So I think God is really testing our ability, how we can manage with less, I think. This entire time, we are very thankful to Public Health Foundation to have found time, despite the crisis, and to all the participants to actually come together on a platform to share experiences. When we did the first series from 15th to 18th of April, we realized that there was a lot of eagerness and excitement, and eagerness to learn and excitement to share. So we thought we should do a series after a week, because now a much better picture of the entire pandemic would be there. We would know what exactly is happening around the world. Perhaps we would have learned from our experiences around the world, how to manage it. So I think that is the main guiding idea behind doing this second series. And I'm happy to see that over 350 participants have registered. And hopefully our experts will guide you through the 4 topics that have been chosen. And 2 are very critical. That is, one is, of course, protecting the healthcare workers themselves, and plus, how do you communicate with the community effectively? So, besides the medical aspects of it. So, these 2 are critically important. And we would, of course, in the GD, while we create a platform where we can come and share our experiences, from our perspective, it is very important that we also learn from the good practices that is happening around the world, because that help us. India also, we see the number is increasing. It's slow. It's roughly 1% of the global infections. Right now, we are close to 25,000, while the total numbers are close to 2.6 million globally. But the fact is that it's a worrying trend. It has not yet slowed down. And I have a feeling that because different nations have peaked at different times, we may see perhaps a faster spread in Africa slightly later this month or early summer. So we should basically be looking at a long-drawn battle against coronavirus, and I think prepare accordingly. So idea is to preserve whatever sources you have, use it most efficiently, and of course, keep sharing and learning from each other. So with these words, I wish you all the best, and wish this e-workshop as bigger a success than the last one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for giving your valuable inputs and blessings to us to start this new journey of e-workshop series. This is the second series which we are going to start today. Now we have Professor K. Srinath Reddy, who is the President of Public Health Foundation of India. He's also there. Professor Reddy is currently the president of PHFI. Earlier, sir was there as a head of the Department of Cardiology at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Under his leadership, Public Health Foundation of India has established institutes of public health in different regions of India. Currently, we have 5 Indian Institute of Public Health and 1 ancillary campus in Bangalore also, which is a multidisciplinary public health education, research, health technologies, and implementation support for strengthening the health systems. He was appointed as the first Bernard Lawn visiting professor of cardiovascular health at the Harvard School of Public Health, and presently serves as an adjunct professor of epidemiology at Harvard. He holds advisory positions in several national and international bodies, and recently published a book, Make Health in India Reaching a Billion Plus. He is also an adjunct professor at Roland School of Public Health, Emory University, and honorary professor of medicine at University of Sydney. He is the first Indian to get on the National Academy of Medicine, as well as awarded several prestigious international and national decoratories and fellowship. He is a Padma Vibhushan awardee. Professor Reddy is a member of Government of Indian Technical Task Force of COVID-19, and he is also advisor to the Government of Odisha and Andhra Pradesh on public health. We are very lucky to have him also with us today for this second series opening, and we would request now Professor Reddy to give his blessings and give his opening remarks on behalf of PHFI. Over to you, Professor Reddy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bharla, and I'm grateful to Ambassador Sinha for giving the green flag for this second webinar series. It's a matter of great pleasure and pride for the Public Health Foundation of India to be partnering RIS as well as the GDC in trying to reach knowledge across the world and to provide a platform for sharing experiences, particularly in the area of primary health care, but also spanning all of health services and community-based public health. Because this is a global threat that requires a global trust in order to counter it. And for that, we need to depend upon robust science to lead the way. But at the level, we also need, apart from well-functioning health systems, social solidarity, community-partnered public health, and also very responsive healthcare systems in order to accomplish the goal of providing the right kind of response to meet this public health emergency. At the global level, we require a sense of partnership and knowledge-sharing platforms which can inform us of experiences in different countries so that we can adopt best practices from elsewhere too, while we are trying to deal contextually with the problems in our own countries. Therefore, this kind of a webinar is very important to bring together people who are actually providing health care in different countries with different types of health systems, with different epidemiological profiles and different stages of health transition in order to form a community of learning and practice where we can have knowledge sharing on a very broad basis. This webinar in the second series now has participants from 31 countries with over 700 participants. This exemplifies the interest in people who are actually delivering care to learn more so they can serve better. And we at the Public Foundation of India would like to support them in their quest for learning what are not only the basic tenets of public health and good medical care, but also to explore what are the new areas of knowledge that are emerging which can inform and energize our response to this epidemic. This is a new virus, therefore experiences globally being gathered in different countries. It's not that any health system has been prepared earlier to deal with competence and full effectiveness right from the first instance, but everybody is learning now in the process. But the low and middle income countries to whom this webinar is primarily addressed have both advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantages, of course, are that we have low financial resources. We also have health systems which have not been very well resourced financially and have deficits in human resources. Nevertheless, we have far greater experience in the recent decades in dealing with infectious disease outbreaks and epidemics. Our health systems are much better geared through that testing experience of various infectious disease epidemics, and therefore our ability to do contact tracing, surveillance, community-based care, all of these are much better indeed. Secondly, we also have, through this experience, built in much greater social solidarity as well, which is of vital importance in terms of countering this epidemic effectively. Also, having gone through the HIV/AIDS experience as well as some other infectious disease outbreaks, we have also learned how to counter stigma, which can be a big barrier in delivering effective health services with the degree of empathy that is required at the community level. So I think there are a lot of learnings apart from science itself that the low and middle income countries can actually bring to the rest of the world. But even in terms of science, I believe we have very robust institutions which are actually engaged in research and learning from implementation research on the field, as well as basic research and clinical research in the area of exploring how this virus actually is transmitted and how it can be tackled even in clinical settings. So the whole area of epidemiology, clinical care, social sciences, all of these are well knit together in this kind of a response. And the Public Health Foundation of India believes truly that we need multidisciplinarity of knowledge to inform multisectoral action. While this particular seminar may focus much more on the medical aspects, please remember that you're also important leaders in the community who ought to be able to educate the community, rid the stigma if it exists, provide confidence that we can collectively counter this epidemic, and foster that sense of social solidarity within your community and strengthen global solidarity at the international level. And we, from the Public Health Foundation of India, will be always there to assist you as you move along, whether as individuals or as teams or as countries, to provide an effective response to this epidemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable inputs and guidance to us to start this particular series now. As you all know that this is the second series, which we have recently finished the first series on 18th of April. And as the need has come from the various colleagues that wish PHFI should continue this series in collaboration with GDC and RAS. So we have constituted the 4 major topics which we have taken it up. Today it's going to be the first session that is on epidemiology. Will cover the surveillance, containment, social marketing of social distancing, and routine vaccination, and disaster action plan, and the rehabilitation. Followed by tomorrow, we are going to have management of COVID-19 cases and preparing and managing the health facilities that is going to happen. The last day, we are going to have a session on communication, because communication plays a major role. How do you communicate during these type of crisis movement? Because the right messages should be populated. And today, because of multiple myths which are going on, multiple rumors, and being at Google is available, so all of us have become a Google doctor also. So I think it's better that we should have the right population of the right messages, so that as a healthcare professional, we are acting as a frontline workers, and it is our owners that we should disseminate the right information and to the right way. So with this, we have created this capsule of 4 series, and today we are going to start the first session, and we have none other than, but we have Dr. Varun Arora. He's our eminent faculty and associated with the PHFI as the resource person for various of our workshop. Dr. Varun Arora is an associate professor at Department of Community Medicine at Pandit B.D. Sharma Postgraduate Institute of Medical Sciences, Rohtak. He has vast experience in the field of public health, and he has worked in a license with Government of Haryana since 2012 and serving as a resource person in many training courses and workshops across India, and looking after the preparedness and management of coronavirus as an officer in charge, control room COVID-19 PGMS Rohtak. So it's none other best than him. I think he's one of the best person which we have taken it up, and let us see what he is going to tell us about the today's session. Over to Dr. Varun.
Thank you, Dr. Bhalla. And thank you, Dr. Srinath. And thank you, everyone, all the eminent dignitaries. And this is the second series. Those who have joined for the first time, I would like to reiterate that in the first series, I tried to cover the magnitude of the problem, the epidemiology, the clinical feature, and differential diagnosis. So today we are going to move ahead after the epidemiology. Right now, we all are very much aware of this virus. This is basically a single-stranded virus and how it replicates. Still, a lot of studies are going. And today, we are going to talk about the surveillance, also about the social distancing, routine vaccination, and the rehabilitation of COVID-19 patients and those who have recovered from it. So, before moving forward, I'd like to begin with the where Dr. Bhalla shared what is the magnitude of problem we are facing right now. And Dr. Bhalla, it is visible to everybody? Yes?
It's visible, sir. It's visible.
So as you can see, this is WHO dashboard. And as Dr. Bhalla said, that we are having around 2.6 million cases and 84,000 deaths. So these are the reported deaths. And if you just zoom it a bit, you will see country-wise how the countries are performing. Citing example like this, like Mali, and I can also zoom. And the overall effect is that even our small islands, they are not escaping out of this big problem. Talking about like Niger, it is 681 confirmed, and you can see and compare yourself. Nigeria, the problem is growing a little bit faster. We are having more than 1,000 cases. So just like this, we can see the whole world into this. And if you see how the cases are just growing up, these are actually cases, these are the confirmed cases, you see. So what we are expecting when we are cumulating all of them, so there is a graph which is going up. So the graph is still going up, and within next 2-3 weeks, we are going to see more of the cases. Uh, Western world, USA, and also the European world has already seen the worst of it, and the worst for Southeast Asia and Africa is on the cards. If we don't take stringent action right now, the situation is going to be very grim. So we'll have to be very cautious, and you can see the case comparison like Europe and America. So two of the best continents in context of healthcare facilities. The best of knowledge, the best of healthcare workforce, medical officer per 1,000 population. And when we are talking about most of today's audience is from Southeast Asia and Africa, and the case load is low, we can see 2-3 things. One, it can be either that our testing is not that much high. The second, we are lucky that the transmission has not not has got into that aggressive manner as it has been done. It may be the effect of lockdown also. There are other theories also, like we say latitude theory or chloroquine malaria endemic theory. We are very much actually getting infected from the viruses. BCG vaccination theory has already been rejected by the WHO. Let's hope any hypothesis that works for our favor, it should work. So today we are going to talk about ahead of it, and you can see the daily cases. This chart, I think, will help you estimate that in which direction we are going from where we are right now. So now coming to today's session. Today we are going to talk about surveillance, containment, social distancing, strategic plan, and rehabilitation. So let's begin with a hypothetical situation, and I think there is a lot of infodemics and some positive things like human trials have already started for vaccines in UK. There are 5-6 vaccines which are actually have been eligible for human trials. So this is a good thing. And the other good thing is, like we are saying, the doubling time all across the world is now a little bit reducing. Now, let's begin with this hypothetical situation because this is what we are going to answer at the end by the end of this presentation. You are on a cruise, and due to unprecedented storm, unexpected storm, dozen of crews, which are actually traveling in the sea, carrying thousands of passengers, are forced to dock on a prosperous island with good electricity internet facility. But you just came to know that there is a mysterious, highly contagious infectious disease is propagating through air droplet transmission with no cure or vaccine till now. And you are the doctor, you don't have a strength, you don't have any vaccines, and you have just limited supply. And the immediate help that can arrive to you will take months. So first of all, what information you would like to have and how can you get that information through the various resources? Second, more important, what response and action plan will you develop and what guidelines would you like to follow? So consider that you are the leader in your area. It can be hospital, it can be a district, it can be a nation, or it can be just your home. So what response or action plan you will develop and what guidelines? And the third, you are doctor, everybody is looking at you. What advice would you like to share with fellow passengers and how will you ensure that whatever advice or information you have given, it is transmitted and it is imparted into the sustainable behavior change? Because there is a lot of information, but why do we behave the way we behave is really an answer still not been, no research has been done. This is one of the good picture. I always said that I'll start with the positive of Maldives, I think, so people will be able to recognize and various small ships. So if such kind of situation comes, what will happen? So let's start with our topic and we will answer these questions while coming forward to the next slides. Surveillance. We are talking about public health surveillance. It is a mix of French and Latin word, which says "sur" means over, and Latin vigilare, which says keep watch, or French veiller. Sorry, I'm not good at French, but veiller that means watch. So overwatch, watching from above. So the definition is, as per WHO, the continuous systemic collection, analysis, and interpretation of health-related data needed for the planning, implementation, and evaluation of public health practices. The words are continuous, systemic, systematic, analysis, and interpretation. We have a lot of data available on that, but are we able to analyze it and interpret according to our needs? And what is our need? It is for the planning, implementation, and evaluation. So right now, in context of COVID-19, we have to plan that how to move forward if we go from step 1 to step 2 to 3 to 4, like WHO has said that if you have only international travel people, if you have a single cluster, if you have multiple cluster, or if it has taken a shape of an epidemic. So based on that, you need to plan, and that planning will help for future survival. And few countries have shown it that by proper planning and implementation, they have emerged as the public health leaders when it comes to COVID-19. So success stories we will share. It is also known as epidemiological surveillance, syndromic surveillance. And disease surveillance, right now WHO is doing this disease surveillance in which it, like I showed you one of the slide at WHO dashboard, that how the disease is progressing, what is the doubling time, and how it is progressing into various continents, which continent are having most of the problems. So what is surveillance? In small words or simple words, it is data collection for action. We are collecting a lot of data, but are we using it? So this is what is the purpose of surveillance. So this is where we are having the disease. We are getting all the reports, and as health agencies or analysts, we have to study the summaries, interpretation, and recommendation, then implement it again to the. And where comes the role of implementation research, whether whatever we are summarizing, recommending, whether it is being implemented or not, and what are the challenges which each country has in contrast to other countries. Like I already shared, we are showing that we are having very less cases. But if the number of cases rise, do we have that kind of healthcare infrastructure like Italy, Germany, UK, and US has? The answer is no. So what would be the situation in our country? It will be more brimming. So taking into that account, we need to be very careful, and accordingly, the recommendation should be tailor-made according to the population and the healthcare facilities. So public health surveillance, we all know, I'll not go much into detail. One is passive surveillance, where the diseases are reported by healthcare providers, and active surveillance, where health agencies contact health providers seeking reports, and they go into the field, like in malaria, sometimes in tuberculosis. And passive surveillance, we know in dengue and most of the non-communicable diseases. For risk factors, we do the active surveillance sometimes, but sometimes people are coming for cancers, for ISDs, and we do the passive surveillance. HIV is very famous for sentinel surveillance, and sentinel surveillance is also now going to start in SARS-CoV-2 also. It has a role. And syndromic surveillance, where we are just going by the syndromes. When we are talking about now COVID-19, so these all surveillance have an active role based on which, as I already said, in which zone you are right now, what kind of transmission your country is facing right now. So surveillance, as I already said, can be done at any level. It can be global, it can be regional, national, at state level or province level, it can be at district, village or town level, even at your hospital level. You can do the surveillance of various patients who are just coming for your fever clinic or just for just a checkup. You can do surveillance even at your community level, even in your clinics and lab. So most of the countries right now, even the middle income and low income countries, have established indigenous or WHO guided surveillance system for local diseases which are prevalent in their areas, or diseases which are as per mandate of international health regulations, like yellow fever. When we are talking about Africa, there are other diseases of like polio, which are of very much concern for the international health regulations. So I am talking today as the global audience. What are the objectives of global surveillance for COVID-19? The purpose of global surveillance first is trends of COVID-19 disease at national and global level. Any single digit will not have any answer if you don't know whether the trend is rising or declining. Even a declining trend, the cases will be high, but you can just match it with every week data or every day data corresponding to last month, last week, or you can see whether you are rising or declining. And the second, which is very important of this surveillance, is old proverb is a stitch in time saves life. So rapidly detect new cases in countries where the virus is not circulating, and monitor cases in countries where the virus has started to circulate. So in African countries, in Southeast Asian countries, it is very much important to see every case, do the contact tracing. So the third important objective is to provide epidemiological information, conduct risk assessments at the national, regional and global level. We need to have the prerequisite information to do the risk assessment. Most of the populations in various countries are also divided by geographical area. Some are at high risk, some are at very low risk, some are having very overcrowded area, low socioeconomic status. You also have to see whether they are susceptible or not, what kind of elderly population they are having. So these kind of risk assessment based on their socioeconomic factors, their age, their rather I would say what is the susceptibility level. So we have to get that risk assessment and quantify our area and do the targeted intervention into those areas which are having high risk zones. And the fourth one is that it gives us information to guide preparedness and response needs. I'll come to my question which I started. What kind of information would you like to have when you have just landed on an island, there is infectious diseases? So I think these global surveillance objectives will be in unison with whatever you are thinking, like what kind of information, because you are very much well aware that you have to go to the island, and what kind of preparedness and response measures you have to take, and for that, what kind of information you would like to have. These days, there is a new word which is actually kind of a mobile technology innovation, which is known as e-surveillance. And China has shown it that all the mobiles in Wuhan and other places, they put it on e-surveillance. There was a mandatory app which had to be put, and many countries are currently promoting e-surveillance. Like in India also, this is Arogya Setu app, which we are advocating. But you have to be very cautious. First of all, how they work. It is actually basically contact tracing with the help of mobile technology. It works by alerting everyone in close contact. It may also be possible to send alert to indirect contacts. So you have to fill data accordingly, that you have fever or you have cough or you are having these kind of symptoms or you have been diagnosed. And whomsoever have come across you, it may be a market, it may be any public transport, or it can be your local nearby vicinity neighborhood. So an automatic alert will go to them that this is an area where one COVID positive patient went. So all the people deliberately will not visit that area. So this is the good side of this e-surveillance, and it has been shown in China that it has been successful, but it is mandatory there. So, but many of the countries which are following the democratic model, the rollout of contact tracing apps have provoked a global debate, even in UK, even in Germany, because digital rights activists have warned that an overly intrusive approach, because this is the app will be able to tell wherever you are going, where are you standing, when time the symptoms arrive, how many people are there in your family, and how many of them are actually in your close contacts. So it can also backfire when you're talking about encroaching into privacy of a human person. So you have to take it. The best advice would be advocate it, do the social marketing, advising it, I would say through media advocacy, that how much important it is. So it can be done, but it should not be enforced directly. So as I was talking about surveillance, there are various WHO, various countries who have these surveillance, e-surveillance kind of platforms, and weekly and monthly reports are going to them. And currently, WHO has suggested that Global Influence Surveillance and Response System (GIA-SRS) it should be used for influenza-like illness for diseases which are not labeled as influenza. So they are actually suspecting them as COVID-19. So currently WHO is advocating global, and you can see it even on that. I will just try to showcase one of the Excel sheet if possible. So this is how it is. I just downloaded it from the WHO site. So if you see on the first page, it is the procedure, how to do it. On the second page is the national weekly. I have quoted the example of Nigeria. Then transmission at sub-national level. So you can see in country, these are the basically admins and various areas, zones and sub-national level, and you can report from those areas. So these are available for all the countries. So they are applying this global influenza network for COVID-19 also. So if you haven't seen, you can also check. The same is for the FluNet. FluNet is also when this is basically started many years back, and about the flu, various influenza A, B, and other types. So we can now use this e-surveillance data to get the information. The third, WHO Global Surveillance and Monitoring System, it also tells about the various health workforce logistics available in that area. Along with that, in African countries, few of the innovation like EIDSR, Electronic Integrated Disease Surveillance and Response System, especially in the West African countries, you can check it. And also, I had already said that mandatory surveillance through mobile phones in few countries have been there. But there are robust system in many of the countries. I'm citing few of the examples, like USSA is having National Syndromic Surveillance Project. In India, it is Integrated Disease Surveillance Project, which has been bestowed with the responsibility to do the daily reporting for all the COVID-19 suspects, probable and confirmed cases. Now here comes a part. In the last presentation, I clearly showcased when will you say that a person is suspect, a probable and a confirmed case. So through these integrated surveillance networks, we can act while there is still time. So there are trigger points. So when you see one case, even that one case of COVID-19 will be a trigger point for a specific response based on that country. I just came to know in Nigeria, they are also having IDSR, and basically there was a yellow fever outbreak in 1986 and 87. After that, they developed this system, and after that, there are other countries also. In Maldives, they are using one of the WHO platform, CIDAS, CRO, and through this, this is one of the moment when these digital platforms can be made more robust and can be used for active surveillance, or rather it for I would say robust response at the time when we get the information. So it is one of the opportunity, blessing in disguise. The same I would say, like in Myanmar also, they have a very good NMCP, National Medical Malaria Control Program, as it is endemic. 5 of the various non-communicable diseases are the frontliners cause of mortality in the Myanmar. And based on that, they have now developed a malaria surveillance system. And based on that platform, it can be now replicated for even COVID-19 if you have such system. The same I would like to say about, we have a very good polio AFP surveillance system that can also be taken into account when we are dividing our area for the surveillance. I'm just citing one of a very good example, multiple surveillance system for COVID-19. So COVID-19 surveillance system, when you are planning to develop it, I'm talking from a public health policy maker's perspective or any district planner, that COVID-19 surveillance may draw data from a combination of data sources from existing surveillance system based on country specific surveillance system. For example, CDC from USA, it is right now drawing surveillance data from influenza and virus respiratory disease surveillance, syndromic surveillance, case reporting, commercial lab reporting, the healthcare safety system, and ongoing research platform. So all the data is being pooled, and then the real picture comes. The more the data we are able to do the triangulation, the real picture will come. So sometimes there are countries which are criticized that they don't have a robust information system. That is why the cases are low. And yes, it can happen. It may happen. So you have to first look at your strengths, weaknesses, and what are the opportunities. I will call it that whatever existing surveillance system you are having, this COVID-19 is an opportunity for all of us to just develop, or rather, I would say, re-infuse the manpower or the technology to develop it and tailor-made it for COVID-19. Now coming to the second part after the surveillance, we came to know, yes, that these are the areas which are having the COVID-19 positive cases. Now, how to proceed in such places? Every case of COVID-19 in beginning should work as an epicenter, and around it, they need to prepare a containment zone. A containment zone, and beyond the perimeter, which is actually the boundaries. It can be the village, it can be a district, it can be a large block, depending on, it can be like a combined population. Based on what kind of geographical area is there, it can be a ward in urban area. So it can be a small town also, based on how many cases are coming positive. And there is another zone which is a buffer zone. And what kind of activity we are expecting? If it is a single cluster and local transmission, which is actually the level 2 as per WHO. In containment zone, what you have to do? You have to do the isolation and management of cases. You have to do the quarantine of the contacts. In the last presentation, I shared what are the high risk contact and low risk contacts. Now do the enhanced information, education, and communication. You have to do the active influenza like illness surveillance or acute respiratory infection surveillance. Now, when we talked about in the beginning, here comes the role. In those areas of containment zone, you will have to go beyond the passive. You will have to go for the active surveillance. Then you will have to enhance the self-reporting, where comes the role of mobile apps, self-reporting apps. Then enhanced personal hygiene, hand hygiene, and cough etiquettes. We discussed it in the last presentation. Establish control room in the local health facility to look after day-to-day activities, and ban local mass gathering. As already sir said that yes, Ramzan is there. My good wishes to all my fellow friends. Right now, we can do a big favor to our country by avoiding mass gathering. We can just stay at home, do our religious prayers, and avoid mass gathering, especially if we are into the area where local transmission is going on a high level. And do the lockdown of identified clusters like schools, buildings, or hotels. Now we are coming to the buffer zone. Buffer zone has some relaxations. Here we will do just the passive surveillance, but this is just an example of India I'm citing. In your country, like WHO has given advice, in every other country, depending on what kind of healthcare facilities you have, manpower availability, based on that, these activities can be increased or decreased. And enhanced self-reporting, enhanced media surveillance, and training on case definition and contacts. Most of the countries have helpline numbers, so they can do the media surveillance also through helplines. And if we are coming to the next stage, when the community transmission is there in the large outbreak, there are multiple clusters, so there will be multiple containment zones. So beyond all these, which we have discussed in the last slide, we will just say that you now go for the environmental disinfection also, refrain from leaving home. Lockdown should be very aggressively maintained. The borders should be sealed. After that, the control room should be not only at district level, but also at the block level. And now media surveillance should be done there. And one of the another thing, as our panelist said, that monitoring of rumor register. There are a lot of rumors, and one of very painful news that we heard from Iran, where some people also drank one of the disinfectant just with the one of the rumor that it will save them from COVID-19, and many of them died. So, as a responsible district health planner or one of the, I would say, academician, it is our responsibility to restrain the rumors which are actually every day are in like info. There is an infodemic of our information, and lot of them is not correct. And mobile specimen collection unit for those outreach areas where you can't reach. So when we are talking about containment, I have just cited example of India. The successful containment strategies, the basic principle are the same: social distancing, quarantine, isolation, use of mask, hand hygiene, and etc. Active case finding. But now I'm talking about some of the country-specific examples, which actually are now the examples which other countries, based on their health profile and manpower, can just imitate. South Korea was one of the countries which started aggressively the active case testing of even the asymptomatic. Even the Japan and South Korea also advised and rather advocated the use of masks. And it was done through social marketing, media advocacy, availability of masks, and along with that, a positive reinforcing environment for the people. And these active testing, they quarantined a lot of asymptomatic patients when they were spreading the virus into the community without knowing even that they are infected. In China, they have the data is doubtful. I will not discuss it. That they have shown the success story of Wuhan by active disinfection and these use of mobile technology. Also, with I would say infection control practices at every level possible. The quarantine level, development of the hospital at such a fast pace, like in 2 weeks. Freely available mask, hand hygiene, social distancing, lockdown, everything, but with a pinch of salt, because sometimes it is having that the deaths are more than which is being showcased by the China, but still it is able to manage this outbreak. In India, I'm just citing example because most of the audience currently can correlate with India when it comes to the availability of manpower. Our healthcare infrastructure is more or less the same. Our this surveillance system is more or less the same. So based on that, India did the lockdown at a very early level when the number was only 500. Along with that, the implementation of lockdown in one of the study by Oxford, the strictness level, the stringency level, India was given 100 marks. That the most strict lockdown implemented was in India. And based on that, there have been studies which are we are saying that we are just ranging around 20,000. If it would not have been implemented strictly, the number would have been in 2 lakhs, because right now we are the second most populous country across the world. So this lockdown with strict implementation can also have some of the good containment strategy examples. And there are many other countries also. So after surveillance part, containment part, we are now talking about social distancing. Currently, there is one vaccine which has shown dividends, which has shown that it has promise, and I will call that vaccine as social distancing. But it is so cheaply available that people are not utilizing it to the level it should be. It is a non-pharmaceutical infection prevention and control intervention, and this is one of the intervention which each one of us should promote till the time we don't have a vaccine or any pharmaceutical intervention which can halt the progression of this disease. It is an intervention which is implemented with the purpose to stop or slow down the rate and extent of disease transmission in a community. And the impact is to eventually lead the decrease the spread and morbidity and mortality due to the disease. Now, social marketing is the application of commercial marketing technologies to the analysis, planning, and execution. What is the purpose? To influence the voluntary behavior of target audience in order to improve their personal welfare in that society. Now I'm talking about one of the example. We are rebellion by nature. Whenever government says stay at home, there is always another subconscious mind that I may come out, what will happen to me? But when you social market it, you change the real need into the felt need of the community. Now there are two kind of need. One is the real need. So what the commercial marketing says, like there are 10 or 20 types of toothpaste, 10 or 20 types of various grooming creams, and the way they market it, everybody thinks I need to use it, I need to use it. So if we do the social marketing of social distancing, it is going to be one of a very cost effective intervention, and it will be documented because social distancing is the only answer we are having right now. It is different from the advertisement. So I will just pass it and just talk about, for social marketing of social distancing, we need three things: information, correct information. We should know the art of interaction with the community, and the involving those people, involvement, that if you're not involved with them, the answer will not be there. I'll just cite few of the examples. In MCH product, maternal and child health product, a social marketing across the globe for condoms, especially in the HIV hit areas, in especially the African region, for OCPs, oral contraceptive pills, ORS, which is considered one of the innovation of the century, oral rehydration salt, which has saved so many lives because of the children who were dying from the diarrhea. Iron folic acid tablets, even the institutional deliveries and clean delivery kits. These are the some of the examples where people come and say, I need polio drops. Where people come and say, we need ORS sachet. So currently, we need to do the social marketing, and how we will do it. This is, I will go later, that even the doctors, they are also finding it very difficult to maintain the social distancing. But I will first come for the community, how you can do it. If right now there are politicians or policymakers, the message will be different. You can see, if we will not use any kind of social distancing, this would be the graph. Can our does our district, state, or the nation can have such much have the capacity to handle such cases? No, our capacity is this much. So, what is the message? If with social distancing, if you are going to see 7,000 cases a day, now you will see 1,000 cases for 7 days. The cases will be the same. You have actually flattened the graph. So this is the message if you want to do the social marketing for the policy maker. There are a lot of youth in Africa, in India, in Southeast Asia. How will you advise them to maintain it? Just say that if one case is there, and after 3 months, 1 week, you will, without social distancing, there will be 3 cases, and after 6 weeks, there will be 1,000 cases from one case. And this is evident. Everybody knows through cases that even after 30 days, it will be 406 cases, and after 6 weeks, it will be 1,000 cases. So the social distancing, the message need to be different according to the audience. The social marketing, these kind of IEC material posted in the walls of college will do the social distancing. And if they are doing social distancing, just 33% of your contacts and the cases will reduce by 10 times. Alcohol, very common in India and many other places. So this is one of the photograph of Kerala, and one message, one picture says a lot. So if they are able to do the social distancing, so can you do it also across your country? And most of the people are living in town, so there are a lot of mental health problems. So just say social distancing in itself says it is the same, and it is also the social distancing. So you can just we have seen in European countries and even in India, like people are just clapping for the social healthcare workers. They are singing songs. So promote social distancing. Don't force it on the people. If you will force it, what will happen? There will be a rebellion attitude, and people will come on the roads, and it is happening right now in the USA where people are opposing it. So you will have to take everybody together, and this is how you will do it, especially for the elderly who are feeling locked down at home. So you label them as in this family, in this community. This The eldest one is the social distance champion. Give them a logo. This is how you will promote the social distancing and do the social marketing. Even the corporates, you can see the logo that they are promoting the social distancing. Very innovative, and this is the part of corporate social responsibility. There are some barriers into it that the people don't think that this way of social marketing have any results. I told you, social distancing has already saved so many people, so many lives, but still we are not understanding the importance of it. The consumer base is very heterogeneous. So if we are talking about those people who are following Ramzan, the answer would be different. Those who are not following it, the strategy would be different. So customization of your social distancing message to various many segments, which is actually very difficult. So you have to find ways, and here comes the role of innovation. So there are various challenges, and sometimes the media does not give you that space, and it is not done properly also. But if it is done properly, and if you are a doctor, healthcare settings provide a unique opportunity to reinforce messages aimed to consumers through brief counseling. And as a trusted source, because people have a lot of faith on the practitioner, so reinforcement of social marketing messages adds value beyond the effect of mass communication. If there is an ad coming on the TV that you should maintain a distance of 3 feet or 1 meter, but if a doctor says, who's your family physician, you say, it will percolate into the society because they considered you as God of their area. Now, after the surveillance part, after the containment part, we are touching just the superficial part because the time is less, and we will just try to address all of them. My mail ID is there. You can ask your questions there also, and also in the question answer. Then we talked about social distancing and how to social market it, and then we are talking about the vaccination. These are basically a lot of crucial areas, especially when we are talking about African countries and the Asian countries. WHO says disruption of immunization services, even for brief period, will result in increased number of susceptible individuals and raise the likelihood of outbreak-prone vaccine-preventable diseases such as measles. Such vaccine preventable diseases outbreak may result in increased morbidity and mortality. I'm repeating the words because if it happens, if there is an outbreak of vaccine preventable disease country and you're already just somehow surviving the COVID-19 outbreak, it will lead to a great burden on your health system. So the high potential for vaccine preventable disease outbreak makes it imperative for countries to maintain continuity of immunization services, but with a rider wherever services can be conducted under safe conditions. Now, this one rider, I will come to this detail. This is one of the example. Recently, when I was reading, I came to know that in Africa, Africa Vaccination Week, African Vaccination Week, in which vaccine works for all is the slogan. But despite this, there has been many countries, it is not visible, but it can be seen. Chad, Nigeria, South Sudan, and many other countries have postponed their immunization. Because of this, there has been study that 21 billion children in Chad, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and South Sudan are basically not getting the vaccines which they should get, especially talking about the measles. So there are chances of measles outbreak very soon, and these are the various countries in blue like Brazil, and you can see Cambodia, Bangladesh, Nepal, which have postponed. They can be postponed when now there are 7 guiding principles for immunization activities during the COVID-19 pandemic. But again, I would say, looking at the various propositions, what is the status of immunization in your area? What kind of healthcare facility, healthcare workforce you are having? You have to take decision into your area. But as per WHO, immunization is a core health service that should be prioritized, and immunization delivery strategies may need to be adapted, should be conducted under safe conditions without undue harm to health workers, caregivers, and the community. Now, these 3 words are very important. The word is adapted. You need to change your routine immunization. A brief change, I would suggest. Earlier, we used to call everybody together. Now you have to call the people according to that how many children you can cater on one immunization schedule. Whether you can immunize 20 children, 30 children, you have to mark rounds that a person, a lady with a child should stand here, a 3 feet distance should be there. All our healthcare workers should wear personal protective equipments. Also, the caregivers and the community should wear their handmade masks or other masks, because if there is a transmission of COVID-19 into that area, and sometimes healthcare workers becomes positive, it will have a very devastating effect on the immunization. So it needs to be adapted. The healthcare workers going for outreach areas, outreach immunization need to be safe, and it is the responsibility of the government. And along with that, our active surveillance should be maintained for vaccine preventable diseases. They should be maintained, not only maintained, but reinforced. And also COVID-19 surveillance should be added to it for early detection and management of VPD cases, and wherever feasible, contribute to surveillance of COVID-19. As already said, all the governments have national immunization technical advisory groups, and they have a very important role in the maintenance, adaptation, suspension, or reinstatement of immunization services. And here comes the crucial part. If provision of immunization services is negatively impacted by COVID-19, as many of the countries have already stopped the mass immunization, you right now, those countries need to develop the strategies for catch-up vaccines for the period post COVID-19 outbreak, when this outbreak will subside, which is expected after 3-4 months. So at that time, you need to develop the plan right now, that how to go for it. Like measles catch-up campaign can be there, and you have to develop the strategies to track and follow up the individuals who missed vaccination, assess the immunity gaps by the surveillance part, and re-establish the community demand. Because many times people are also afraid. We are getting questions every day: should our children be vaccinated or not? So it will depend on our healthcare facilities, and we are promoting it, because right now the areas where the endemicity is not very high, the local transmission is not high, it can be promoted. But our healthcare workers are using all the precautions. Here comes the important part. Innovation and creativity will be established, will need to be established, required based on your areas. So, based on the current understanding, mass vaccination campaigns should be temporarily suspended. I am repeating the word. Mass vaccination campaigns should be temporarily suspended till the time the WHO recommendation says the other way, and countries should monitor and re-evaluate at regular intervals the necessity for delaying the mass vaccination campaign. Supposedly, you find you by your surveillance method that now there is a vaccine preventable disease who is emerging. In that scenario, you can also do mass vaccination in the containment area and in those areas which are at high risk. So you have five fingers are not the same, five countries are not the same. So you have to tailor make these guidelines according to your areas, and to conduct the outbreak response mass vaccination campaigns with a careful risk benefit analysis. I would say the risk benefit analysis can be done. There are various kind of risk benefits which I will now address, which will come, which actually was in the earlier slide. It can be done on a case-to-case basis, and it can be done based on the delayed risk. And the last, people are asking whether older adults should get the vaccine of influenza. Yes, they should be. Wherever feasible, influenza vaccines of health workers, older adults, and pregnant women is advised by WHO, and based on your local practice vaccines, the people who are belonging to IAPs, pediatrics and other general practitioners, they can do it. So I was just skipped a slide before, which was about the doctors, which I will address now. When I was talking about my first hypothetical scenario, that if you have to convey the message, and one message which implies for the doctors and private practitioners, many of the general practitioners are saying whether the OPD should be opened or not, whether we should do the surgeries or not, as now they say that the OTs with the centralized ACs are very dangerous, and many of the transmission of the virus is going on in the surgeons also, in the orthopedicians also. So here I will just answer it in the few slides, few words. You need to develop the informed decision making. You give all the information. The doctors community, the medical association should decide it. There should be shared decision making between you. The use of technology, telemedicine, the use of apps, video apps to talk, to discuss with your patient, and also the risk stratification. Like I already discussed in that risk stratification, who are at high risk of mortality, just attend those people. Emergencies, trauma centers should be open, and any person who can be managed just by telephonic communication. So the risk stratification should be done, whom to see, whom not to see. Risk stratification for the general physician also is very important. Supposedly in your area there are two physicians. One physician is 60-year-old who is also diabetic and hypertensive, and also a 30-year-old doctor who is not having any of the non-communicable diseases and does not have that much high risk. So which physician should do the OPD? It should be the healthier one, so that the risk stratification is done. Even for the doctors, they should pool their resources and they should use their services together. This is one of the disease which has joined the medical fraternity across the borders, also joined the communities, also joined the governments also. And the other part is risk benefit ratio. So risk benefit ratio is if somebody is coming to you with diabetes mellitus in the coma state. So if you are not looking at that patient because of this social distancing, so the benefit is not that much and the risk is very high. So you have to do the risk benefit ratio of the community, of the doctor's patient relationship also. And in India, I'll cite the example of Sarvodaya and Antyodaya, that you reach to the last man who needs your services. And Sarvodaya means to reach all the masses. And the example of Ubuntu, which is very much practiced in South Africa. I am what I am because of who we all are. A doctor is known by the patient, and if you will not see the patient, so you need what kind of doctor you are, who will label you doctor. So safeguard yourself first and see how by innovation methods, by elongating the length of the step, by putting one of the barrier between the doctor and the patient. Try to use your PPE very judiciously. And the last word I would say is salutogenic approach. You know the problems, but try to find out the holistic approach, how to do it, and logical empiricism, that one size does not fit for all, and you have to find logic that what is the right answer for your area. So vaccination, we were discussing that, are the risk benefit analysis. Now coming, there are two scenarios. The first, where health system capacity, as per WHO, where health system capacity is intact, essential health services are operational, there is adequate human resource, adequate vaccine supply. In that area, fixed site routine immunization services and vaccine preventable disease surveillance should be executed. While important, maintaining physical distancing, appropriate infection control, equipped with the necessary supply. So this is one of the scenario, but when the scenario is where the provision of limited services is feasible, immunization of vulnerable population and should be prioritized for vaccination against outbreak prone disease such as measles, polio, diphtheria, and measles. So you will have to devise a strategy according to what kind of health well, and I will request you to follow the principle of SWOT. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are the opportunities and what are the threats? Based on that, you decide your areas, you decide your strategy. So rather than a disaster plan, I would say strategies, plans, and operation from a nation perspective are very important. The biggest word I would say which has saved many countries is the coordination between various multiple stakeholders. And many countries which have failed is also because of this one word, which is coordination. So at the national level, at a province level, it is very important the leaders in public health do the coordination and do the planning. As I asked in the beginning, the planning is very, very important, that looking at the limited resources, how will you go about it? How will you go for the surveillance? How will you go for the plan and management? By step 1 to step 2, if there is a transmission into a larger area, how will you go about it? And the second is engage and mobilize communities to limit exposure. Like lockdown, it was one of the very important strategy where we limited the exposure. The third is active testing, find, test, isolate, and care for the cases and quarantine contacts to control transmission. So these are all WHO guidelines. The fourth is provide clinical care and maintain essential health services to reduce mortality. In the wake of COVID-19, it is being observed that many of the other diseases are basically not addressed the way they should be addressed. But like in Ebola outbreak in Africa, where there was a readiness, there are trained health workforce, there was rapid response team, there were isolation unit and area, make the best use of them. And accordingly, do the strategies, adapt the strategies based on risk, capacity, and vulnerability, as we already discussed, that how much your community is vulnerable, how much your health workforce is vulnerable, and the most important is suppressing the community transmission. There is a concept of R naught, which is transmission dynamics, that a person, how many other person he will infect if he becomes COVID-19 positive. So the various studies says it is around 2.2 to 3, the range average is 2.3 across the world. With lockdown, we have reduced it a bit, but if there is no social distancing norms followed, it can be 4 or 5 also. It may happen in African countries, it may happen in Southeast Asian countries. So, suppressing community transmission, we have to maintain the social distancing and put the R naught below 1. Only then the outbreak can be contained. And last is transitioning to and maintaining a steady state of low level or no transmission. Again, I would say flattening the curve. Do all the measures to flatten the curve. This is the of paramount important. Coming to the last part is the rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is very, very much important. And in rehabilitation, community mitigation strategy as a part of tertiary prevention. The persons who have been recovered from COVID-19 are facing a lot of social outcast. They are first clapped, but again, the people are very much afraid to visit their homes. They are not given jobs. They are not actively absorbed into the community. So if you see the whole COVID-19, it is nothing but primordial, primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. And I will tell you how. Primordial prevention, improve your immunity, improve your mental health, improve the level of knowledge, and you just do these simple measures like social distancing and just put it into the genes. I would say by again and again training the children, and when they will become adults, they will follow this. This is the practices which are done in South of Korea and Japan, that everybody is following such distancing. The second part comes primary prevention, where again the role of this is are mask, use of personal protective equipments, vaccine if it will come there, also chemo prophylaxis, also along with that social distancing again. Then coming to the secondary prevention, it is basically early diagnosis and treatment by the use of RT-PCR and do the surveillance. And also along with that, we will say that just appropriate management guidelines for every country, how to manage them, how to isolate them, how to quarantine them. Even quarantine is primary prevention. So isolation again after it is also now early diagnosis and treatment part. And rehabilitation is our tertiary prevention. So individual, communities, businesses, and healthcare organization all part of community medicine strategies, and you do the rehabilitation at all these levels, at individual level, at family level, at community level. You have to do the physical rehabilitation, you have to do the economic rehabilitation, you have to do the mental rehabilitation. So these should be the most important is psychosocial support. We are currently facing kind of outcast just like HIV. People are very much afraid even if the person is positive, because the latest guideline says the concept of herd immunity is not there. People can be reinfected again. There are virus coming into the stools also. So quarantines, isolation, and by a new disease can be very stressful for those involved and for their family members. Just considering yourself into a kind of in an area which is actually having all other suspects, and they stay there for 14 days, and even then when you reach home, at home, you are not a very welcome guest by the community. And this psychosocial stigma already like living in a prison for 14 days. So it is very imperative for all the government to maintain their quarantine and isolation facility very, very, I would say, supportive, with psychological support, also very much conducive for the living. There has been example all across countries of various places that the quarantine places are not up to the mark. There is a problem of sewage, there is problem of drinking water, there are mosquitoes there, there is false smells, the distance is not there. So accordingly, you develop your quarantine places, your isolation facilities, so that the stress may be minimized. The social distancing measures from one to another can be very much frustrating. When you have been adopted for handshake, when you are just adapted for the hugs, so in that scenario doing the social distancing, so it is very important to say you are doing the social distancing, but it is not emotional distancing. It is only the social distancing. Emotionally, you are bonding more. And this apart, the healthcare workers, all of us are under stress. They are working against the disease about which new information is coming every day. Under stressful environment, you have seen the example of China, USA, Italy, Germany, where so many healthcare workers, says that 11% of healthcare workforce are infected in Italy also. So you are at very high risk. So doing the insurance of those healthcare workforce people, giving them awards, motivating them, and also just alleviating their stress by just helping them with the help of adequate PPE. Many of the healthcare workers are in stress because of non-availability of PPE. So devise the guidelines. Like use also in India, also if you don't have N95, you start reusing it after every 4 days. So there are different guidelines according to different countries. So their mental well-being is very, very important. The morale and motivation is very high. We need to learn from various countries who are able to contain this. In the end, I would just say with one proverb, those who learn from others people's mistakes are very wise. Those who learn from own mistakes are wise. But those who don't learn from neither others nor own mistakes will soon become otherwise, and this will happen to various countries based on whether you are ready to learn from various other countries' examples, from your own examples. So with this, I wish you all the very best and thank you very much for being patient audience. Thank you.
Ah, thank, uh, thank you, Dr. Varun, for a very informative and further update since the last first webinar series, which you did give the whole idea of the basic epidemiology to the prevention. And today we have quite learned, I think all the participants will share my wish. We have learned a lot of new things we have done since the last 2 weeks. From the basic surveillance to the use of technology, I think the other South Asian as well as African countries will definitely, if they want further information on use of technology, they can write to us at the COVID mail as well as we'll share your mail IDs. We have got a lot of queries from our participants that they also wanted, some of them have joined news in this series. So let me assure all of them, once we complete this series, we'll be sharing the PowerPoint presentations of the earlier webinar as well as this webinar, so that any reference you want to see, that will be made available to you. Apart from that, the use of social marketing, which is very important, since the social marketing concept has been used in maternal and child health since ages and other areas. But in COVID-19, social marketing is very equally important. And then the rehabilitation as well as the whole support, the psychological support, which both the healthcare providers and to the patients, the cases, contacts, as well as the suspected people. So psychological support is equally important to all care of health workers. So definitely we have learned quite a lot today. And I think a lot of queries have started coming on. But before I'll hand it over back to you for the question and answer, I'll request Ambassador Sinha in case he would like to give any comments you have. Ambassador Sinha, sir.
No, thank you very much. It was very interesting. I was just listening carefully to what Doctor had to say. And we look forward to the other 3 days also. So please continue the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And
Thank you.
I'll hand over to Dr. Varun, sir, to the messages have been, question and answers are coming in the Q&A box. So he will kindly take this question and answer.
So thank you very much for all the positive and thanks for motivating words. The first question I would say, Dr. Pushkar, you can answer. They have said that can we have an access to the first webinar series of COVID-19? As I have missed it, would be nice if you would sync. So Dr. Pushkar, you can answer it.
Sure, sir. We have seen that many participants have joined this as the first time they have registered. So we will be providing all the PowerPoint presentations of the first series. And in case we do get a lot of requests from the others, we may plan to have another webinar for them. But currently we'll be definitely sharing the PowerPoint presentations. In case a lot of requests do keep on, then we'll approach Ambassador Sinha, can we have another round of first webinar for the new participants. We'll be sharing all the material with everybody.
Thank you, sir. So the second question is also answered. I'm coming to the third question. In Myanmar, facilities quarantine is facing many difficulties due to rise in number of suspected patients. At that time, what measures we should do? Home quarantine may be answer, wish to be noted with home quarantine. This is asked by Pyosan Ong. Thank you so much for asking. Pyosan, I would like to answer these questions with a few of the literature available on the various internet. One of a Chinese team went to Italy, and one of the experiences they shared that even in China, when it happened in Wuhan, first of all, they advised for the home quarantine. But later they understood that this is one of the mistake they did, that even home quarantine, there are a lot of susceptible at home, and the transmission of the cycle will not be changed, will not be curbed. So transmission will keep on percolating within the family members. So the same thing happened in Italy also. So in Italy also, when the China team went, they said that this is the same mistake they are doing. That is why China created 2 or 3 big hospitals, converted their museums into various big quarantine zone, so that a quarantine person does not come into contact with any other susceptible. And all those people who were quarantined based on their risk factors, so it was actually the chain was somehow broken there. So home quarantine is not the best approach. My first advice would be the facility based quarantine. But if it is not possible, and people, again I said, there is a lot of trauma attached to it, people will not agree to it, in that situation, clear cut guidelines in a very lucid language, do's and don'ts for the family should be developed by the Myanmar government, and they should be very, very religiously followed. Because home quarantine, sometimes we are not able to get the separate toilet, sometimes the kitchen is the same, and sometimes you, one way or another, they come into contact, so the purpose of quarantine is lost. The first priority would be facility quarantine, the second would be home quarantine with clear cut mandate and religiously doing it. You can also do the social marketing of facility quarantine, as I said, that what are the benefit, and according to different audience, that if you want to save yourself and save your family, just surrender yourself for 14 days. And you can see that message, that you will not do it for yourself but for your kids, the people will definitely willing to go, because this will save their family for getting infected. So such kind of messages can be there. Home quarantine have ensured, and even like in India, we are doing this lockdown, and this lockdown is just everybody is at their home. Still there are a lot of clusters which are being found with, like the whole family which is found positive. So such kind of cases we will see. Definitely it is better than doing no quarantine, but facility quarantine is the best answer. So accordingly I would say, like I asked the question in the beginning, that what kind of social marketing you will do, what kind of information you will have, how many cases you have, so you just plan accordingly and develop your quarantine area in advance. In advance, you just develop that if I have like, if I can see there are around 130 cases as per WHO site and 5 or 6 deaths in Myanmar. So this is very less, but you just see the graph that you have to prepare yourself for 500, 1000 cases. And just now, your museums, your schools, and various other places where you can develop those facility-based quarantine. The second question by, sorry if I am not good at pronouncing, Myo Jaku. How are contacts with the confirmed cases quarantined in India, facility quarantine or home quarantine? First, I would like to answer it. The guidelines is for the facility quarantine based on whether he is a high risk contact or a low risk contact. And again, the facility quarantine should be motivated, should be promoted rather than the home quarantine. In which situation is the lockdown exerted to a ward or a township or a region in control of COVID-19? Which is the best time for testing? I'd like to answer in piecemeal. There are no clear-cut guidelines when the lockdown should be enforced. It can be best answered by sorry sir. So it can be answered by 3 things. First, I think public health specialist, even a economist, even the governance people all sit together and decide which day it will be. There are guidelines that if it is into a local transmission within that, like it is a hotspot, and there are cases which have started circulating into that, it is the time when the lockdown should be exerted. India exerted when the total number of cases were 500, and we are talking about 130 crore people, and the lockdown was exerted at that time. My answer to this question would be as early as possible. After you have prepared and you have planned all things, go for the lockdown as early as possible, because social distancing and lockdown has decreased the chain, the doubling time, because of which many countries are saved also. The third question you have asked, that when is the best time for testing a contact with a confirmed case of COVID-19? Ideally, it is being said that the incubation period is 2 to 14 days. The person should be tested on the 5th day, and after 5th day, if it is coming negative, he should be advised strictly for home quarantine or facility quarantine, and then to be retested on the 14 days. So 5 days and 14 days to test between. So it should be done like that. But again, the contextual factor is, which is important, is what kind of healthcare, I would say, facilities you have in your country specific area, region specific area, whether you can afford that much or not. So many cases, what is the testing capacity of your area, how many cases per million you are doing. Like South Korea did around 3,500 cases per million. Even the USA is doing that much of cases, but India is doing just 200 cases per million, sorry, less than that. So based on that, you should know how many testing capacity you should have, and should it be reserved only for suspects, or for high risk contacts, or low risk contacts, or only for the COVID-19 positive cases. Anonymous attendee would like to get your views regarding herd immunity approach. Should it be discredited for time being? Yes, it should be discredited for time being. It is encouraging a false sense of security. It has been seen that the people who were positive earlier have also been positive again. So, and again, the excretion in the stool of this virus has been seen, though it is in fecal-oral transmission has not been validated. So people are developing a false sense of security that once they have been declared as COVID-19 negative, they are cured. But now South Korea and China have done the studies where the genome has been found through RT-PCR in the samples again. So herd immunity is still a long distance to walk, and till the time we don't have a vaccine, just mere presence of IgG, IgM would not be suffice to label it as herd immunity case. So Ila Rathore has asked, COVID-19 fear has affected regular healthcare services, including institutional deliveries, regular immunization, family planning, and others. How should a country respond to these setbacks? I have already answered about the regular immunization, that right now you should start developing your future plans. So catch-up campaigns should be there. Along with that, people should be involved till now. They should be enumerated. Their phone number should be there. Just be in contact with them so they are not lost. Along with that, there should be a positive sense of encouragement by the local government, by the doctors, that it shall pass too. India, say, human beings have been very robust. Whenever such problems come, they are ready to fight any challenge, and they will challenge this, and they will also come over it. So when it comes to immunization, there have been guidelines so that no discrimination for pregnant women should be there, which are available also for the family planning. So I would advise that in this scenario, a lot of role comes of the social marketing, a lot of role comes of the positive reinforcement, future planning accordingly, and having the catch-up campaigns, and tracking all the people, keeping the communication high even through phones. So these kind of strategies should be there. The next question is about the same, about the PowerPoint by Tung Pong Ko, that the PowerPoint or PDF, it will be shared with you, ma'am. And the next question is by Antiano. There is currently a lot of negativity on the vaccine in Kenya. People believe the vaccines can be used to advance other agenda. What should be your views in this case? Sir, I have answered this question. Already I know that in Africa, there are 1 or 2 countries which are actually have gone ahead with their routine immunization program. And along with that, I would say there is a lot of negativity, but there is always a silver lining. What you need to do is develop immunization champions, those kids, and promote them on social media. Those have been vaccinated, those have been protected. Try to avoid this negativity and use this tool as developing your champions, which against this negativity came to you. And those will be actually your torch bearers in the community. One person will take 10%. So if you just label them, you just tag one person vaccinated. So what will happen? The other people will think nothing has happened to this person. So they will also say, I want to have this tag. I want to have this medal. I want to get this certificate. So this certificate is not only for the people, also for the healthcare workforce, because negativity for those who are providing these services is also very high, and they are the first contact with the beneficiary. So I would say that there are a lot of opportunities, lot of marketing skills through which it can be done. And again, I would say, as a policymaker, the not going for the vaccination would be having a double fall, as already been shared. Supposingly you are just battling COVID-19 and tomorrow you are battling with DPT outbreak, this pertussis outbreak, or measles outbreak, or polio outbreak even. So how will you manage that situation? So just, I would say, teach them, train them, motivate them, just reinforce them. Social marketing of the vaccine should be there. Also, there should be community champion. This way, you can just relieve this negativity feeling along the masses in your country. One question asked, after how many days can COVID-19 patient go home and stay with their family member after being discharged from COVID center? The guideline about it, that the person need to be tested again. There should be 2 tests at the end when he should be labeled as negative. Ideally, 14 days should be the period when he should be put into the isolation ward. After 14 days, the quarantine period should, isolation period should be 14 days. So total should be approximately 28 days. 14 days of COVID-19 in the hospital, 14 days after getting treated from the hospitals, and many of the countries or the states have increased this 14 period time at home into 28 days, because they have seen people getting infected on the 13th, 17th and 19th day of the incubation period after of their family. So some countries and some states are not taking any risk, and they are doing the home isolation or home stay for 14 days to 28 days. Next question is by Fuse CEU Mon. Please let us know your view for more than 14 days facility quarantine service in some countries. Ma'am, I already said that few countries, not only isolation but also quarantine. Incubation period is considered 2 to 14 days, but some are saying that it because information in evolution is there. I will repeat one of the statement by one of my mentor, Dr. Sanjay Kalra. Sometimes the answers are not in black and white. There are shades of gray also. So every country are having their different protocols. In India, currently it is 14 days, but one state like Telangana is saying now it should be increased 28 days. So same can be applicable based on the information. We are saying that most of the cases having an incubation ranging from 2 days to 14 days. But yes, there are chances after 19 days, 23 days. So in my views, 14 days is the minimum which should be done. If it can be done more than that, it is always a thumbs up. It should be done if it can be done. So it is the government policy which should be there. Hussaini Usman in Nigeria has asked, in Nigeria, there is a lot of hospital transmission whereby doctors transmitted the disease to those clients. In this case, how do you think we can break the chain? This is very important question, Dr. Hussaini. I must compliment you asked this question. Sometimes doctors are thinking they are invincible, that they will get disease till the time they are not using the PPE. I would like to again reinforce one word here. Most of the cases are asymptomatic. As per WHO data and various country specific data, out of 100 positive cases, around 70 to 80% are asymptomatic or mild flu-like symptoms. Only 20% people would need hospitalization, and even healthcare workforce people also. So, taking into that regard, just think how if a healthcare worker gets infected by a patient, and then he is looking after other patient without using appropriate PPE. So the use of PPE is not only to protect healthcare worker, it is also to protect the other patient from the healthcare workers. So in that scenario, the hospital transmission by doctors, we have also seen in India, where there has been a chain of various patients through one of a doctor in Delhi, also in Pune, also where they, and there is another one small area, Bhilwara, which is a good model, where the doctor became positive and many patients. So this is the same scenario. I would say break the chain. Doctors need to lead by example. They need to use all the PPE. Most of the doctors are getting infected not during the donning of the PPE, while doffing of the PPE. So the doffing of PPE should be very well taken care. Even in the CCTV camera, the guideline should be there. The mask, once they have put the mask, it should not be. Most of we have the practice to put our mask down, then take a cup of tea or water, and then take it ahead. No such practices should be there. So break the chain. A doctor should be apprised of its responsibility that you may be asymptomatic and positive. So just use all the standard precaution while looking after your patient, even when you are not having any symptoms. So consider yourself as a positive case, and how will you then look up for your patient? So these kind of sensitization need to be done. The next question by Antonio Jalango, the negativity toward the impending introduction of novel COVID-19 trials. Yes, sir, there has been that people are not coming as volunteers also. Also, people are having like HIV vaccine. There is no HIV till now. We don't have any vaccine. So whether we will be able to develop vaccine or not, there were hundreds of vaccines which started the trial. Only 5 vaccines which have passed to the human trial phase. Two of the China, US, UK, and Israel. So we have very limited data available on it and very few promising. But again, there is a silver lining. We don't have the vaccine, but we have social distancing. Please follow it as a vaccine till the time we don't have vaccine trials for various drugs and the vaccines. Dr. Kachwano Alex have asked, as of yesterday, there was a publication from the Bill Gates and it addressed something to do with immunoglobulins IgG as a very good game changer, as shared with his research-oriented individuals and bodies. How viable is this alternative to your knowledge? I have not read this article. What I have just came to know that plasma therapy, which is antibody-rich plasma from one cured patient when infused into the other, especially those who are on ventilation, is kind of a passive immunization. And such passive immunization has shown good results in many of small settings, but a lot of huge trials need to be done. It was followed like IgG are long-term developed antibodies. IgM and IgG both have potential promise, but IgG survive for long. So in SARS it was done. Even in Ebola, such kind of immunoglobulins were infused in the patients, especially those who were hospitalized and those who were on ICU or ventilator. Those passive immunity was given to them and very successful results were there. I will go through this article and I will reply you back onto this. Again, Dr. Kachwano has asked, in Uganda, some individuals have proven to be asymptomatic even on the 14th day, but only to come out positive. What is your take? I have already discussed this question that some people are coming positive on the 19th day, 23rd day, but basically more than 95 to 99% people are coming within 14 days of span. Only 1% or less than 1% cases, less than 1% are coming in the zone which is beyond 14 days. So it is basically, again, I would say shared information decision. It is the pooled wisdom and pooled resources accordingly, how much quarantine facility you are having. Does in Uganda, do you have the capacity to keep the people and sustain their livelihood or sustain their food, logistics and all, can take care of them for 20 days? So you have to look into that perspective also, not only from incubation period, but also whether you can sustain them for 20 days in incubation period. So with this regard, I would say the answer lies in your how robust your healthcare system is, how much sustainability is there in your system, your what are your strength weaknesses, where you can afford to have patient for 20 days a client in quarantine. So many things you have to answer before extending the incubation or extending the quarantine period. Two questions have asked. First is by Dr. Malachi Babaginda Peter. Please, I want to know how safe is the COVID-19 vaccination and why are some countries speculatively against it? Uh, COVID-19 vaccination, no such vaccine has been there. The vaccination, which is a routine immunization in that country's perspective, has been promoted by WHO, looking at the risk benefit ratio, that if we don't go for the vaccine, there are going to be other vaccine preventable diseases outbreak, as we will develop a large pool of susceptible within that time when the vaccines are based. As per now, COVID-19 vaccination has not been developed, so we cannot say how safe it is. Alilu Abu Bakr has asked, in the process of conducting fixed session on immunization, parent and caregivers are fear of being infected from COVID-19. Please, what strategy should apply to avoid such to happen? Very good question by Dr. Alilu. Aliu. I would like to say, if you go on the WHO site, there are FAQs for the family members whose children need the vaccination. Various myths, various do's, various don'ts. So please go ahead about this FAQs on the WHO site. There should be few things which should be very much common, like every parent or caregiver should come with a mask. They should maintain the social distancing. Along with that, the fear can be alleviated, fear can be declined with a positive knowledge that you will not get COVID-19, your children will not go get COVID-19, but in that, the risk benefit, what kind of risk you are developing, the children is getting risk of getting 4 or 5 various diseases. So in that fear, you can suggest that how it is transmitted. The best weapon is your knowledge and how you transmit it. So if you transmit them in a positive sense, if you are wearing a mask, if you are maintaining social distancing, I am, as a healthcare provider, is using all the PPE. I am sanitizing my hand after vaccinating every child. I am using the mask. So you just give the risk benefit idea. You also say that I am protected. There will not be any problem due to social distancing. Not any other person can infect you. But if you don't get vaccinated, there are chances of getting other diseases which will put you at a higher harm than you are right. This is known as risk benefit ratio. So this is all about motivation and your local staff. Like in India, we have ASHA workers. So your local field grassroots level worker can do wonders into motivating those because of the right knowledge. Lot of negative and like one example would have happened of any healthcare workers getting infected, and it spreads like fire. But 99% are not have been infected. So based on that, take the positive message, use your good level workforce and spread the message. Dr. Fauziat have asked, my question is to the organizer of this beautiful lecture. Thank you so much, sir. Could it be possible to put up a lecture like this where a comprehensive nutritional care for COVID-19 could be discussed? As well, all know nutrition also could have its own vital role to play. Yes, Dr. Fauziat, but Mosi, the nutrition has a very big role. Most of the people who are getting infected are actually having their low immunity, and that is, I would say, working as a catalyst for the infection to propagate into various dismal clinical features. So as I told in the beginning, what is nutrition? Nutrition is a kind of primordial prevention. So even we are not infected, we should have a very good nutrition intake, especially the doctors, because we are going to the war front. If you see your army, who is the robust and the healthiest one in your whole country? It is the army, because they have to fight. The same applies for the doctors. You have to take care of your nutrition. All the community which are susceptible, you have to take care of your nutrition. And nutrition is also one of a vaccine, just like social distancing. Promote nutrition, promote social distancing, promote cuff etiquettes, promote the mask. These kind of social interventions, which are primordial and primary intervention, will have a lot effect on the people. Question, vaccine for COVID-19 available? No, sir. Right now, the trials are going on. I heard that India is using hydroxychloroquine prophylaxis for health staff. Can you share your experiences? Yes, sir. ICMR shared their advisory for all healthcare workforce who is involved in COVID-19 patients treatment or the lab testing. For these people, for these healthcare workers, hydroxychloroquine 400 mg BD on day 1, followed by 400 mg after 1 week. After 1 week, again I am repeating, total 8 weeks On first day 800 mg, next week 400 mg, next week 400 mg, up to 7 days. And for high risk contacts, it is for 400 mg BD on day 1, that means 400 mg in the morning, 400 mg in the evening. Then every week, like if you had taken on Monday 400 mg BD, then on next week on Monday 400 mg. But the data is inconclusive. Most of the studies done across the nation have doubts whether hydroxychloroquine have beneficial effect or not. Many of the places have used it, but still the robust data about hydroxychloroquine as prophylaxis need to be arrived at. The same is for the chloroquine also. So I think this with this I have tried to answer as per my knowledge. I thank you all for being a patient audience, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity, the PHFI, and thank you all of you for this. Stay safe, stay at home.
Thank you, Dr. Varun, for such a interactive and very learned. I think all our participants across the nations in Asia and Africa have definitely benefited both from the whole session as well as the Q&A section as well. And I will again like to repeat to all our participants, we will be sharing you all the various PowerPoint presentations, as well as one other thing is India has come up with a lot of guidelines. Our Ministry of Health and Family Welfare is repeatedly, so what we have shared with our other participants also, on a page, all the different sites will be sharing all the guidelines of Government of India. So this can be after the completion of this webinar, and these are available on the ministry's site also. Ultimately, because you are the corona warriors of your respective countries, so you can always learn from each other's. Whatever we are there to learn from other countries, the good habits as well as the social distancing norms. How do we fight against COVID-19 and vice versa? So we'll be definitely sharing you the same. And tomorrow we have the next session again at the same time. Tomorrow the session is the resource husbandry in a resource challenge times, diabetes perspective. And we have an equally prominent expert here, Dr. Sanjay Kalra. He's again a renowned endocrinologist from Haryana, the same place Dr. Varun belongs to. And thank you to Dr. Varun again. And any last words, sir, you want to say before we close up?
Yes, sir. I would like to share a story, those who have joined for the first time, and I'll take just 1 minute.
Sure.
Thank you for all the motivating words which you are saying. Some of the questions I will answer you, sir, through mail. Is the meat or meat products should be really be banned? No, but the meat should be cooked. It should be thoroughly cooked. Half-cooked meat should not be used, as there are human animals to human transmission. So last word of would say motivation, a 30-second story. I always repeat it, and I will just say that it is very beneficial for me also. There was a big fire in a jungle. All the animals came out of that jungle, and they were watching how their home was burning. Then there was a small sparrow. She just went to the river, took a little bit of drop of water in her beak, and put it into the fire. She did it again, and she did it 10 times. Animals said, "Innocent sparrow, this act will not at all mitigate this fire. The fire will burn." But the sparrow very, very innocently said to all the other animals, "I know my efforts, all my efforts will not just curb this fire, but in the history, my name will be written as a Corona warrior or this fire warrior, and all of your name will be known as spectators." So right now, all of us have the duty to be that small sparrow, do whatever we can in our capacity, do those, become those small sparrows in the form of advocacy, in the form of doing immunization, in the form of advising your family, peers, also treating patients, also spreading the positive message, right information. And if you can't do anything, just stay at home and do the role of that small sparrow so that you become the Corona warriors for the future history. So just don't be a spectator. Do something for the well-being of this world. Thank you so much. I'm also doing my part. PHFI is also doing. PHFI is a big sparrow. It's an eagle. I'm a small sparrow. And all of us can just curb this Corona-19 fire. We can, by all these small droplets, if we put it into it, this fire will be calmed off. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. And I think the last message was together we can. We have to come together, both the big and small sparrows together, and all our health workforce across various countries and continents. We have to fight together. Thank you very much. And we'll request our participants to join us tomorrow again the same time, 3 p.m. India time. Thank you.
Thank you.